Good afternoon, everybody. Let me change something here. There we go. Good afternoon, everybody. Robert Slewinski again, back for our final presentation of the afternoon. I know it's been a long day, but actually, I don't know, for me, it's gone by pretty quickly. And but it's been a pleasure presenting this information about DNA and genealogy. I hope you have come away with something that's very interesting and insightful to help you with your research and review of your DNA results. One of the things that we're going to be doing now is doing a review of several patrons of the Kokomo-Howard County Public Library, including Ashley Harris, Jeffrey Bennett, Doug Workinger, ARNUNDO, OCHOA, SHERYL, JEFFRIES, and Amy Russell. Let me see here. This is a very fresh presentation, and I'll let you know right now that some of the people who are in this presentation will be getting a little bit more time than others. If you have tested with Ancestry, they have made it a little bit more difficult to provide interpretation, primarily because there is not that good enough direct competition comparisons. However, will show you, if you don't get a lot of time on this, I will show you how other portions of the presentation with other people who have tested with Ancestry, you can expand your search and review of your results. And let me see here. And I have some reveals at the end as well, unexpected reveals. Okay, just to let you know, this might turn into the Ashley Harris show, just because Ashley has provided me with not only her Ancestry DNA results, but also her transfer of the data to family tree DNA. And so I will look at those both as well. So Ashley Harris, thank you for providing your DNA results for interpretation. I will look at some ethnicity estimates, DNA matches, and talk a little bit about them. And let me see here. I've got, so right now we have an ethnicity estimate of 66% England and Northwestern Europe. We'll go into more detail, and 22% from Scotland. And there's a couple other as well. Typically in the DNA matches, they just show the photos of people who have posted photos. Otherwise, these are the only ones that have, I mean, not everyone has a photo on their DNA match, but for some reason, the Ancestry DNA algorithm has picked up just the photos to put it on there, so you can anticipate to see actually faces of people you match. Okay, Ashley has basically England, Northwestern Europe, including Norway, Iceland, as part of the package of where her ancestors have been determined to be based on her DNA. So we have England, Scotland, Ireland, Norway, and Wales, with the highest proportion in England and Northwest Europe, and 22% in Scotland. Now, one of the things that Ancestry has done is definitely provided some information about transition from European ancestry to those who live in the United States, and American have more recent American ancestry, showing communities where their ancestors would have come over to and settled. And these are communities essentially where, and that's not just one or two people have settled, but potentially thousands of people that emigrated to the Americas. So the location that she has is a community called Eastern Kentucky and Northeast Tennessee settlers. These are settlers from England and Northwestern Europe and Scotland. So hopefully your family tree agrees with that. If not, perhaps the family tree needs to go a little bit further back. I'm not sure at this point. Oh, let me see here. So this area, this community they're talking about, And they're saying you, along with 453,146 other ancestry DNA members, are all genetically linked to this region through shared ancestors. This means that this area over here, let me get my cursor going again. This area has a lot of people that have, when they immigrated from England and Scotland, settled over here. And so there's a large number of people. So we're talking about anywhere from around Louisville down to Asheville in this area that basically were a large hub for expansion from here into the rest of the country. Okay, Ashley's has a couple of, well, she has a lot of matches, I should say. And a couple of them are very close, parent, child, cousin, and first cousins, essentially. She has a lot of matches. The closer the match, it seems that there's less trees associated with it, or some that have been locked at this point. But it is good to know that if you have a parent-child relationship with a match, let me talk about centimorgans for a second here. Shared across 25 segments, she has shared with 3,463 centimorgans. When you have a close relationship, you have a lot of centimorgans associated with that. As you go to first cousin, you notice that first to second cousin, it's like 849 centimorgans. 844 with another cousin, and 774. Now there are ranges. There are ranges of sharing of centimorgans between cousins and between you and that cousin. So we have information about mother's side, and that this is, so she's been taking a lot of time and getting the most out of her money by providing more information that's saying that the first cousins, these are first cousins from the mother's side. Okay, there is a mapping feature that most people go and see the list portion of their results, but every once in a while, I like to go and look at the map that shows. So if we're in this vicinity over here, Indianapolis being down here, you have an idea of that Ashley's matches are pretty much very well spread out throughout the Midwest, leaning a little bit more heavily toward the east at this point. So I don't know actually how many of these matches you have reached out to. I'm sure the closer they are, and actually you're welcome to chime in and turn on your microphone.
Hello.
Hi. So we're taking a look at your DNA matches from the map perspective. Have you reached out to a number of these matches at all?
A lot of the higher ones I have, a lot of the lower ones I have not. My father's mother's side's pretty much mapped out, so that's one where I don't contact a lot of people because it's all done already.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay. Did you know that one of the people that I'm reviewing, as well as you, is your cousin?
Yes, my cousin Cheryl.
Okay. I did not know that when I was doing it, so nobody had told me. So,
surprise.
So okay, let's move on here. But this shows you physical geography where matches are located, or where they say they're located at this point. So it gives you an idea in as far as proximity that there's a chance that you might be able to contact someone that is locally close by enough, perhaps meet in person, if they wish to do so.
Oh yes, there's a lot.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So I did find out that I wasn't so that your second cousin is SHERYL, who's one of the people that I'm reviewing. So SHERYL, unfortunately, what happened is that as I accessed your ancestry results, one of my windows closed, and I went back to try to access the site, and it said access denied. So we're going to work with you and Ashley as cousins and talk about some of the things we compared. It was regarding the genetics. So you're not being shorted as far as your analysis goes here. But I think what we're going to do is tie in how you two are related as cousins and how to compare the DNA. We'll look at that through Family Tree DNA's website as well.
Okay. Cheryl here.
Hey, Cheryl. So let me see here.
Ashley is my first cousin's daughter.
First cousin's daughter. Okay. Okay. Now, I did a random click on a photo, an image of in the front of where it says, you know, hello, Ashley, on Ancestry. And this is Kay Peterson that I cooked. And I noticed that you can do, when you click on that, you get a whole bunch of things to choose from. Now for trees, there was no cross-referencing of trees between Kay Peterson and Ashley at this point, but there is a little bit of talk about shared matches, that you have shared cousins that that are posted here. And this shared cousin has a very decent size family tree that potentially could lead to where the connection is, which is a good lead for a 4th to 6th cousin. Hopefully that's enough at this point. But you can click on the image of a person, takes you to a new page. You can review shared matches, ethnicity, and trees if available. Now, you're thinking about ethnicity, like, okay, what does that look like? So if you click on ethnicity, you can see between Ashley Harris and Kay Peterson, you have essentially shared 14 centimorgans across one segment, and that you have very similar ethnicity estimates, some being higher than others in different regions. But according to all the ethnicity estimates you have, all of them are shared. So that should give you an idea that although you are 5th to 8th cousin in this point, you still have a lot of genetics that's shared through ethnicity from those locations. Okay. I did notice that Ashley was on the Slowinski project page over at Family Tree DNA and wanted to look at autosomal information. And so this gives you a little closer indication of what is provided by Family Tree DNA, including matches, your my origins. There is a matrix that I won't go into too much right now, a data download you can do regarding more information. Chromosome browser, which we'll look at, ancient origins, advanced matches, and more. So we looked at the Ancestry DNA ethnicity estimate, and that was theirs. This is the one from Family Tree DNA using autosomal DNA as well. You could see it's much more compact. It doesn't include Norway in this one, but most of it is basically, it's 100% European, mostly England, Wales, and Scotland, and a little bit of Ireland as well. It's similar to the Ancestry DNA one, but significantly different, that it does not include a couple other countries that may be involved in her genetic background. Okay, this is where I found out about Cheryl being your second cousin, or first. You said first cousin. Will be second cousin on that. What would you want to call that then? Because they gave a range here.
First cousin once removed.
First cousin once removed, exactly. Okay. One of the things that I mentioned before is that if you get a hit on someone, that you'll notice right away that the surnames are in bold, and those are the ones that they have put in their surnames from their family tree, and the most relative ones, the most ones you want to follow. You won't know if they put the most relative ones, but that's why I'm letting you know the most genetically relative ones to you are the best ones to put in there. And so that you can start reviewing those, especially if you don't know who this person is. So Ashley does know who Sheryl is, and that, but they both did test and provided their names or their surnames in there, and these are the ones that cross-reference both sides.
I can tell you that on mine, the ones that are highlighted are my mother's side, and the others that are not are my father's side. I can see that.
Gotcha. There you go. So you know that, but when someone looks at it fresh from their point of view, they might not know that difference. However, what I do see is that Ashley has a number of matches that are specifically paternal side and those that are specifically maternal side. And you are right, definitely looks like you have a lot more matches on the maternal side than the paternal side.
That's the Kentucky area.
Gotcha. Thank you for chiming in. Okay. I don't know if you haven't had a chance to look at the chromosome browser on Family Tree DNA, but this shows you where on the chromosomes, approximately, the DNA that you share. Some people don't have a chance to take a look at the chromosome browser. It's kind of interesting from the point it just provides you information that yes, you do share the DNA, but I'm like, okay, that's wonderful. But this shows you on which chromosome you do share DNA. And what's interesting is that you also share DNA on the X chromosome over here, which is the, now they don't show the Y chromosome on anybody's, but they do show the X chromosome. And you have a fair amount, a large amount on the X chromosome on there. You also have a fair amount on 3, 5, 11, and 14. So as time goes by, and if you have children, or you can see, if you see other people that DNA test that go down the line, your descendants, you can potentially see where DNA that is shared goes down through your descendants as well. And you can use the segments that you see here and compare to other cousins that you match up with, especially if they're in family tree DNA, and potentially you can see if you have enough people in your family that have tested, what potential ancestor it came from. That's a little bit more complicated. Okay. Jeffrey Bennett, I'm doing a YDNA review because he did a YDNA test and a big Y test. Looking at the STR'S, standard tandem repeats, and SNP'S for single nucleotide polymorphisms. So I kind of cut this down to show only the 67 marker results, and this is basically it provides you with origins, or where they think the Y chromosome may have been originated from as far as country. Now, sometimes if there's an exact match of genetic distance of 0, it'll say that, but the matches that Jeffrey has are genetic distance of 3 and 4 at 67 markers. And those essentially are from England, Scotland, United Kingdom, and Wales. And a little bit further distance, there was just 4. One match has ancestry from Germany. None of the matches that are there are very strong, except for the fact that you have so many at genetic distance 3, which are closer to you from the UK, which is a strong indication that your YDNA is most likely from the UK. The higher level test of 111 markers over here, 111 markers, shows Scotland and United Kingdom as being strong matches, and that gives even more credence to the fact that you have a UK Y chromosome. Okay, let's go over what standard tandem repeats and single nucleotide polymorphisms are. So a STR is a repeated sequence of bases and the number of times they are repeated in a sequence. They are used to compare men's YDNA with only a small amount of DNA tested and can be used to determine time to a common ancestor within a couple hundred years. The SNP, because we're doing two different tests that he done, is a single nucleotide polymorphism. It is basically a single base mutation or change that is used to follow the YDNA changes for thousands of years or up to thousands of years. It is used to confirm this STR genetic relationships. I mentioned before, if you have at 67 markers, some like 3 changes between the 2 of men that are matching that, you can confirm that even more with checking out what the last or end of the branch SNP is. That mutation will then seal the deal that you are definitely and confirmed as having a strong genetic relationship. Because there are times when you take an STR test or a YDNA test and you have very similar results, but if you don't have that same polymorphism at the end of that branch, you may be from different branches. And that's where it's very important to look at that very carefully. It doesn't mean you're not related. It could be means that you're related further back than you think. Okay. Jeffrey is joining us today. Is that correct? You can unmute if you like to. This is what the results from the block version of the Big Y look like. And out of all of the DNA tests that I've seen, there are just a couple more of these that are even more intimidating than this chart. The idea is that think of it a little bit more simply. That the idea is that right now it is showing the SNPs, and they're talking about blocks here as well. This is very complicated. So we're going to look at the bottom and it says DNA match is 0, 0. And we have one match that basically shows British and American countries here. And so it basically would show those shared matches. And then there are some private, shared SNPs or bases that they share that are the same on the Y chromosome. And there's some that are private variants of that. Like when I showed you the private variant of my result, I have L450 as a private mutation, primarily because others that tested didn't have that mutation that were from the area that I was from, my ancestry has been from. So it becomes private until more people match that. So right now, with only one match, the benefit is that that match is also a BENNETT, which is very good. And that provides you with a channel to look for potential common ancestor. So, oh, I forgot to lock that. We have the C. Bennett provides an earliest known ancestor of John Bennett, circa 1792. Basically, your STR matches are 3 of them, and we have the information about the furthest ancestor that they have for C. Bennett. I would need to see if you have compared.
He's in Montgomery County, Maryland.
Okay. Yeah, I noticed I was going to put a map on there, but I didn't put the map. I didn't want to give that.
I got one question for you. When you go back, it shows he's from UK. Okay.
Okay. Yes, he shows you're from here and he's from UK. That's actually very good. The question is, have you had correspondence with him?
Correspond with his cousin, who is Carl Ullman. OEHMANN. He's some kind of program manager. And there's another match one step up, and he's in Sweden near the Norway
Oh, I see that. Okay, yeah.
Norway border. So there was 3 of us at one time at that 32261, I think it is.
Mhm.
But he dropped us down to that 335, and there's just me and Chad now.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, over time, sometimes these things shift. So when you do DNA testing, don't think it's written in stone right away. They might change over time. It depends on if they refine the testing or I'm not sure why they would have changed that, because when they get to SNP'S, those are usually pretty firmly entrenched. But sometimes they break off these based on the whatever review or algorithm that they use on something like that.
The gentleman in Sweden, his family lore is that the family line maybe comes from a Scottish mercenary that went to Sweden to fight, which kind of gives me a hint towards the Scotland again.
Okay, that's very possible too, because there are people that have traveled from other places to settle in, and that's a story I keep on hearing. In fact, there have been populations of Scots that settled in Poland as well, which is just south of Sweden. So it could have been just that movement in a certain time period where they were resettling. And it's been well documented in Poland that they have done that. In fact, they've had some of the names of the towns have been Policized from Scottish from when they settled in there. So yeah, I wouldn't doubt that. The question is, you're not finding anything from Scotland specifically at this point, but I would say that does the Bennett in Britain have a decent family tree?
I can't get, that's where my brick wall is.
Oh,
I go back to Samuel Bennett. My
Okay.
brick wall is Samuel Bennett in Miami County. He was born in 1830, maybe in Ohio. And this Chad's relative is John Bennett, and he was 1792 in Montgomery County, Maryland. And then we got the Swedish guy that says his ancestor might have been a Scottish mercenary. So it bounces all over the place.
Okay.
And then you got Native American.
It does, and that would not show up on this.
All right, your map showed something in North America. You showed an R1B, and usually you can't hardly find anything that says a European YDNA in North America.
Yeah, that was kind of anomaly. I don't know why that was up there. That's why when I saw that initially, again, on a larger screen, I was wondering why that was up there. But I'll look into that, because there might be an anomaly with that diagram. It is very strange, but I think I kind of have heard some things where they might have found certain maternal DNA. It just depends on how far back they're looking at. I don't know why that was up there, but yeah, I did. Thanks for pointing that out, because when I saw that, I did it out loud, and I was concerned why that was there. Yeah. But I'll have to look into it. But you do have very strong relationship with the 111 or 5, like the big Y, and that. So if you guys can find a common ancestor at that point through your family trees, I know you're right. You're getting into a brick wall at this point. What it'll boil down to is that English genealogical records are usually very well kept. You're probably looking for when that transition happened between England or Scotland or the UK to the United States. What I've seen mostly is that if you're able to go to those locations where you have the last ancestor, locally they might have better records than you can find online. And I would hope that by now a lot of these things would be digitized, but they still may not be.
Yeah, I haven't been able to find anything. I was hoping he had a brother or some kind of relatives in Miami County, but I can't find anything. So it's, a brick wall. Can you look at this and give me a general idea on what area of the world and how far back would it be going?
Yeah, I can take it. I'll spend a little bit more time on this after presentation, and we'll get back together and talk more about this.
Okay. You got other people to go to. Thank you, sir.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Oh, okay. So basically, I also want to talk about the YDNA tip report. The tip report gives you some information regarding how many generations back, and maybe perhaps this might give a little bit of refinement. If you know, right now I couldn't change the number of generations on this, but if you know more about how many generations back you do not have a common ancestor, you can plug this into this YDNA tip report at Family Tree DNA, and it'll give you an idea. Now, at this point, I get up to about the 90th percentile where I start getting a little bit more excited about how many generations back. According to this tip report, with only in the last one generation do not share. It'll change if you put 3 or 4 generations back. But right now, as just an example, possible 12 to 24 generations without further refinement. Most recent common ancestor could be 300 to 360 years ago, between 1660 and 1720. Now that's without the refinement of knowing how many more generations. So the more further back you go, the more accurate the estimate could be on something like that. So this gives you a little bit of a ballpark about when that common ancestor could be, based on the mutation rate of the STR portion of your testing. Okay, Doug. This is Doug Workinger's information. I'm only covering ethnicity estimate at this point, but I hope that, Doug, you can see that there are other tools you can use within the DNA matching that provides you more information about potential leaking up to other cousins at the same time. You have an ethnicity estimate of 48% England and Northwest Europe and 35% Germanic Europe. This shows a little bit of Baltic states on here. I see that as well. 2%. Doug, I know you're on board. If you could unmute. Do you know anything about any Baltic related relatives?
No, I absolutely know nothing about it. I was always told we were German and that was it. So that was a surprise.
So the Baltic is a little bit of a surprise, but it is 2%. Now, if it was even smaller, I'd say probably disregard it. But it still might come up. Now, what I would say is that wait to the next ethnicity estimate reveal to see if that falls off or not. Because there are times that there are things that they get and they feel that you might be related to them, but then the panel changes. That's where I had that one portion that was Asian that finally dropped off. I was actually kind of not happy about that, but because I thought some more exotic things might be in my background, but it turns out not.
Right.
So,
I'm hoping I'm Viking. So, you know.
Well, you know what? To do that, if you want to find out more specifically about that, do a YDNA test at Family Tree DNA, and that will give you information about what male genetic group you belong to, which then, if you're I1 is the most predominant Viking group, essentially, or Nordic Scandinavian group, whereas R1A is a subgroup of that as well. And then, but that would be one way of more determining that from a genetic genealogy standpoint. One of the things that I wanted to show with this is that we have a Northwestern, definitely very strong Northwestern, because interesting Northwest. So it seems 48% and 35% with Germanic Europe. There is a split in your family, but there must be a mother's and father's side that has a high influence from England, Northwest Europe, as compared to Germany as well. So either that, or you had an import into Germany from other places going in there and establishing residences, or it could be the other way around. It all depends where your ancestors. If you're said that for more from Germany, and someone from perhaps the Northwest UK came down into Germany and settled there as well. The other interesting part about this is it shows settlement areas in the Ohio River Valley, and then in the Pennsylvania settlers. And these are areas that have been settled for a long time. So you have a lot of heritage in the United States from those areas, and you're related to a lot of people that are associated with that. Do you feel that your family history that you know of would agree with that?
Yes, from what I know, we were Pennsylvanian and then came over to Indiana at some point.
Okay. What I'm looking for is reaction to people to say these communities that Ancestry has tagged on to their results to see how accurate those are. And what they're doing is they're looking at your DNA and also other people in the area that settle those areas or have the DNA from those areas, and they're combining those together. So they have a lot of different communities that are a new addition within the last couple of years to Ancestry, which makes it a little bit more fulfilling for those people in the United States who who know they have close ties to most things in the United States, but are unsure about things that are happening overseas. Okay. Did you know about this fourth cousin over in France, Doug?
No, I didn't.
Okay. According to this, you have a fourth cousin that lives in France. You may want to look at your list. That's why I look at the map every once in a while, because the list, you can go a little bit down, but you don't always see everybody, or you don't know where they're from, but the map shows you a little bit more. I don't know how often people who use Ancestry use the map portion of it, but it just gives a physical geography of where people are located. But you definitely have a lot of matches in the Eastern United States, which is a lot easier potentially to contact if you want to ever get together. Well, after the pandemic, of course, but there's also a match in the United Kingdom as well, in the southern part of England. So let me see here. Okay. ARNUNDO, it's either OCHOA or OCHOA. And OCHOA. I was very happy to see this. I don't get a chance to see many people who have tested that have as well of a diversity background. There was one, a couple that had adopted a baby, and they sent me the child's DNA results of ethnicity, and I was like just amazed. It was literally the colors of a rainbow of different locations around the globe. And some people would say, oh my gosh, they're from everywhere. And I was just saying, this is beautiful because it's showing how much diversity in the genome that that person has, and potentially could like have a lot. It's very, it increases the robustness of the genetics of a person by having more diversity in them as well. But let me see, your ethnicity estimate has you at 57% Indigenous Americas, Mexico, and 17% Spain, and 13 other regions as well. Let's take a look at that, because it is amazing amount of diversity in your background. ARNUNDO, were you aware of that amount of diversity in your background?
I was not.
Okay. So, but you are most familiar with your Indigenous Americas in Mexico?
Yes.
Ethnicity?
Yeah, Arnold,
Okay.
he's a first generation American, so both of his parents came over from Mexico, Durango. Okay.
But it's interesting though that a lot of these influences I see in Africa may be associated with, I believe that's the Yucatan Peninsula right there, and some portions of the coasts where there may have been either importation of people or colonization from these areas. I don't see a lot of Caribbean influence on this one, but the percentages outside of Mexico and Spain and Portugal start dropping significantly. We're getting into the 1% range. These maps sometimes show, it looks like there's a heavy percentage from a lot of these other populations, and you really have to look at the actual number percentages to get an idea that the lower the percentage is for like North Africa, the more distant that relationship is with the ethnicity. And so the biggest concern you have technically is looking at the highest percentages, focusing on that, and then from there, as unravel regarding when you go further back in your family tree, then other things may show up. But sometimes, I mean, this may be several hundred years ago we have influences of these areas, but there seem to be pronounced enough that ancestry DNA is picking those up. So I would say, let's see what your next rendition of the ethnicity results comes, to see if any of those goes away or stays, because they seem to change over time. However, as I said, the diversity is very exciting to see at the same time. Let me see here. And that we have, let's focus a little bit more on the Mexican component. Oh, these are your matches, and there are a lot of matches nationwide. And are you aware of, they really spread out on this one. There are several in Indiana, but most tend not to be. There's a lot of matches in the areas around Texas, New Mexico, and California. Have you been in touch with any of those matches at all?
Well, I'm from Texas, but not really.
Okay.
I haven't been in contact with them.
You know, that's fine. What happens is that a lot of people want to find out first, and then it takes a lot of time to go through all these things and to see if you want to contact somebody, if you feel they're close enough of a cousin. And sometimes, you know, they will contact you. Has anybody of your matches contacted you at all?
No.
Okay. Not yet. Let's give it some time at this point. So let's look at this port. This is the area that Ancestry covers, including the southwestern part of the United States and Mexico. It says there is a little bit of a difference in range between 53 to 58%, but that there are more specific areas that your DNA is associated with. Now, this is the broad range where your DNA is associated with, but then it starts focusing on smaller areas as well. Northwestern, you see Durango, Chihuahua, Durango, and Zacatecas. So do you feel that this ethnicity estimate, as it goes down to smaller areas, is accurate or not?
I think it is, because we're from Durango.
Okay. So that is actually a pretty area. I mean, an area right here that's looking at that. They're saying that you have ancestors from that area. So they're getting enough DNA from other samples to make their panels come up and say, look, you know, this is where we think you're from. This is getting to the point where, you know, like I showed my ancestors' states in Poland, that they're getting that much more accurate about finding out where your ethnicity is from. So I think they've done a very good job, and tends to be one of the most accurate ones I've seen in a long time. Now, it's a fight between 23andMe and Ancestry DNA. So place your wagers. Let's see who wins the bout, okay? But let's see, I think I have one more here. Yes, I do, for Durango. So within this area, you have featured matches that are second cousins in this area. Now, second cousin is not that far away. You say you haven't contacted any of these at all. Do do you have any interest? Now, it doesn't matter if you do or not. I'm just curious about that.
Right. It's not that I don't have any interest. I really haven't gone, once I did this, I never went back and played with it or looked to see who was on or who had tested and so forth. So I haven't really got into it, but
That's fine.
it's
Yeah.
interesting, and it's something that I would like to do.
And,
Sure.
and we know you still have family in Durango.
Sure, of course.
So yeah.
Okay, now this close-up map of that, is your family still within this circle or this polygon?
Yes.
Okay. Any outside of that you know of?
Let me see. A Chihuahua.
Okay.
Is that
There's a
Chihuahua
lot-
on there?
Yeah, there's Chihuahua up here.
Yep, I know. I know Chihuahua.
Okay. So that actually they've been able to do a pretty good job of getting it close down. Now that's pretty close. Do I say it does cover a couple of states, but I think that they're getting more refined as time goes by. So I'm excited to hear that when they're putting down some information like that, that gives a lot of information for people that are not necessarily from or specifically have European ancestry. Are you interested in doing a YDNA test to find out if you have a native Y or a European Y?
Yeah, that'd be
The Y
interesting.
chromosome.
Yeah,
It would
that
be because there are times when it could be an indigenous one there, or it could be a European one coming from Spain or Portugal or even England. So something to consider through family tree DNA. And again, I don't get paid for them, but I always think that when people take an autosomal test and they have a male background, it's something that would be worth taking. And also an mtDNA test would be interesting to find out what your maternal background is and see where that lies within the peninsula over there. This also gives an indication about time frames. Do I cover a little bit of that? No, I don't. So, but there's a lot of things that are like just informational pieces that say what during time frames, what people were doing, what culture was like back then, and things like that. So, I really appreciate you sharing this with me because it gives me an idea and to show a little bit more information about different parts of the world. So I appreciate that.
One of the things I thought was interesting is in this, when we first did the test, which was a few years ago, he was showing, Spain and Mexico or Americas, and that was it. And so there was none of the European that's showing up now.
Yeah, the as these ethnicity estimates change and they get refined, they're going to be a lot better. There are some places in the world where they just don't have enough information. And so, as I said, and that's why I'm showing the older ethnicity estimate globally, those areas that they cover. And I was really disappointed for a long time that North and South America were not very well covered. So I think as time goes by, there'll be a lot more coverages. There is an issue, though, that in North America, a lot of the Native American tribes do not want to test or be part of that. There was one statement a Native American did, says like, okay, I'll do the test, but I just don't want to come back Swedish. So that is one of the things that they were concerned about. Identity is very important. And so they have definitely a very solid historical background about their identity. But it is good to know about those things because if you've ever seen the documentary by Dr. Spencer Wells called The Journey of Man, it talks about the travels of essentially how indigenous populations from Siberia came over and populated the Americas. And it was interesting. They were interviewing several Navajo and talking to them and saying, look, I'm starting to understand this. And they were understanding it to the point where like, you know, this guy you're showing me pictures of looks like Uncle, you know, Steve. And so they can see the commonalities, even though it's been thousands of years. But yes, definitely, it'd be interesting to find out from a DNA perspective, if you have the indigenous or the European influence on that. It'll be one or the other. It won't be both. And then if depending on which one it is, you can trace back your ancestry even further. Okay, thank you. Next one is SHERYL. Now we've done a lot with SHERYL and Ashley. So let me see, what else do I have here? SHERYL has this 43% England and Northwestern Europe and 36% Scotland. I think I have one more. Oh, we got to go to do Amy. How are we doing on time here? 36. Looked at her
10 minutes.
Okay,
About 10 minutes.
Okay, that's enough time. Maternal ancestry through family tree DNA, and looked at some matches, maps, and things like that, and also a little bit about autosomal DNA. We'll cover that pretty quickly here. Maternal origins. Amy is H2A2A2. Majority of that is in Northwestern Europe, England, France, Germany. These are the kind of origins where they give people that have the mitochondrial DNA test done. You have a list of matches, and the good thing is that your matches are mostly exact matches, which is very interesting because then you can start looking at their family trees on their maternal side. So the ones that have family trees have this icon with a family tree on that's available for you to click on when you're doing your study. The rest of them have also tested with Family Finder. You can also look to see if they're on there as well. Most of the time when they're a maternal match, they're not always a match on Family Finder. Don't be disconcerted about that. Remember, I said that the maternal line is one thin, long line that doesn't always match, go to every other, you know, the cousin's line as well. But sometimes it does, especially if you're more closely related. So you can take a look at that. And some of them are, there's a couple from South Carolina, some that don't say, New York, and things like that. But it gives some indication of how far back they have less common ancestor. With maternal DNA, because the surname changes with each marriage and essentially almost every generation, you're going to have different surnames that are not going to match, but that's nothing to worry about at all. And people doing genealogy understand that. Okay, matches. The matches essentially, most Northwestern Europe, you have a number of matches in the United States as well. But for H2A2, that is a very similar map that I've seen for a lot of H2s. I actually managed the H2 MT genome project at Family Tree DNA. Let me see here. Close up of the European matches over here. Autosomal results from my origins. It gives you an idea without having to take an ancestry DNA test where your autosomal ethnicities are. There's majority of it is Central European in orange, a little bit Scandinavian, some Irish, England, Wales. Now you have a little bit of Magyar as well. Amy, are you aware of what Magyar is?
No, I have no idea.
Magyar is Hungarian, but it is not just Hungarian. It is is Altaic Hungarian. So that means they came from out in Central Asia and settled in Hungary. But do you think that the ethnicity estimate is fairly accurate for this? From what you know about your family tree?
Yeah, it is fairly accurate. The Spain, Hungarian, and purple one, is that Sicily?
That's Sardinia.
Okay, that's a little surprising.
Mm-hmm. Well, those are much smaller percentages at that point. So But yeah, that may come up and drop out later on or may stay there. If it does, that means there's some sort of influence that happened that connected through some cousin.
Okay. Pretty cool.
These are matches, essentially, a couple of second to fourth cousins. They're shared, let me get the cursor up, 120, 100. The ones that are the highest number of shared centimorgans are the ones that you should look more carefully at. Here's a hit that basically says you have a Dyer surname and a Smith surname. That
Yes.
hit, if they're providing a Tennessee and Louisiana and Mississippi states, if those correlate for what your surnames are, it's worth to do a check.
Yeah,
you
the surnames are right, yes.
Okay, so that's something that you can look into because they don't have a family tree posted on there. And that family
Okay.
tree would be linked right there. If it was blue, it would be on. Now, all these have email
Okay.
addresses you can send email to as well.
Okay.
Okay, one of the things that I saw right away is that these are one of the reveals here. That Sheryl Jeffries and Ashley Harris, although they're second cousins, one of the pictures that showed up right away that is the match between their two results is this lady, Kay Peterson, that I saw. And I thought that was so you have essentially a predicted 5th, 8th cousin. Both of you have a 58th cousin with Kay Peterson. It's a pretty far along the line, but apparently I believe that they don't have any common ancestors on the map here. But if you have a chance, it might not be interesting. It might be interesting to contact that person to find out if you can share family tree information, because up on both of your results for DNA matches in the photo section. Now that only came about because the fact that if those people who have photos it will come up there, but the fact that that's the first time I've seen two people I've compared to have the same person show up. So maybe this might be an indication to do a reach out and find out if you can share family information to see where they lie in the family tree. And the last one I have is that Amy and I are distant cousins. Amy is
How
in
about that?
Yes. Amy is in haplogroup H2A2A2, and I am H2A2A1. We are related through the maternal line. We have differences or steps in our mtDNA of 4, which basically come to a common ancestor is 800 years ago, which is no problem for Amy to go through the genealogical record to find our common ancestor, right?
Sure, why not? Be glad to.
So, I know
Wow,
that's
how about that?
challenging. But as soon as I saw your H2A2 A2 result, I was a little excited about that because I wanted to find out how far back we were related. And so probably around 800 years ago is what I came up. So the thing is that for mitochondrial DNA, there is a change in the DNA once every around 200 to 250 years. So it mutates relatively slowly. And so with a difference in the mtDNA of 4, I approximated about 800 years ago. So, and the actual number is 0.0043 mutations per generation.
Oh, jeez.
Yes.
Wow.
I did do some mathematics on there. I don't do math very well too much. So that is my presentation for today. Concluding that, I think I have yes, here we go. DNA Explorer's email address, Facebook page. Click on there to like. I don't need subscribers or anything like that. So all it would be is occasionally if I provide it wouldn't be an invitation, but just an advertisement for when I'm giving another talk that you might want to attend through DNA Explorers. If you have any questions about your DNA, I prefer questions rather than stories. But if you have something that might be short, I have no problem providing a quick answer to something you have an issue with. If it's a little bit longer detail, we would talk more about how how much more time I would want to spend on something like that. And but I have no problem answering some questions if you have some. And if you'd like to follow up with me about some of the review that I did, please do so. And I'd love to have a conversation with you in the future about that as well.
Okay, I'm gonna put you on my Christmas card list.
Okay, thank you. So if there are any questions?
There were quite a few coming through.
Okay.
This may take me a while to get back to the top of them. Oh, there's a bunch of them here. Hang on. Any good tips for searching Irish ancestors? So many records were lost. Mine arrived in Kalamazoo, Michigan, had a child, and I can't find out anything more about them, or more importantly, where they came from.
Well, local records sometimes get deposited in larger state records. So you may want to go up to like the state archives to find out about if they have records that are local that they have imported or gotten copies of. That is one thing that can happen. And sometimes for local records, if anybody is served in the military, you can search military records. There are a number of different avenues to search. Now you're looking potentially for a birth record, it sounds like. Does that seem like to be the case in this one?
Denise, you may have to unmute to ask that.
Okay, yes. I'm not looking so much for the birth record of the baby that was born, but where the parents came from, because that's likely going to be my O'Donnell and Sullivan people from Ireland or Scotland. And I can't find anything about them other than that they dropped in, had a baby, and the woman was ultimately victim of a homicide in Michigan. But the father, I can't find any trace of him.
Was the child a boy or girl?
A girl.
Okay, that makes it a little bit more difficult then.
Yeah.
You could follow the paternal line at that point if you needed to. There are ways through ancestry DNA and family tree DNA for a mitochondrial test if you want to use genetic genealogy to go back.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'd have to use the paper trail to see if you could do that. Typically, if you can find the birth certificate, you can at least get names at that point if you don't have the names. And then the problem is that the question of what time frame was that person here? Was it time of immigration, or was it?
Yeah, it was around the time where they were coming from the potato famine.
Well, there should be records associated with that. It just depends on finding, starting at the right place to go backwards. So,
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
sure, no problem. Next question.
We have quite a few questions and we're going over time. Do you want to keep going on this or have them email you separately?
I have a little bit of time.
Okay, Cheryl is asking, have you any suggestions on bridging the gap between a fourth cousin match, and that means there was most likely a slavery connection and few records. So can you bridge the gap between that fourth cousin and Cheryl using DNA? And then she says the fourth cousin does match a second cousin on my paternal grandmother's side. The connection may be in New England.
That's actually more fruitful following it along that way.
Okay. So she should just follow along through New England?
Yeah. Well, it's as long as it's closer to a second cousin at that point. That seems to be, the closer you are, the easier it's going to be to find records.
Okay, another question is, if I add an ancestor to my existing family tree, will the site automatically show up on any resulting new DNA matches, and how quickly?
Okay, you're gonna have to reread that question.
Okay, Barry's asking, if I add an ancestor to my existing family tree, will the site automatically show up any resulting new DNA matches, and how quickly?
Okay, the ancestor you add to your family tree has nothing to do with your DNA specifically. So adding an ancestor will not change anything associated with that. If it's on Ancestry and you have a new ancestor on, they may actually pick that up and give you a new hint if their algorithm finds it. Otherwise, it wouldn't change anything.
Okay, you've referenced a book by a Dr. someone, and it's something called The Something of Man.
The Journey of Man by Dr. Spencer Wells.
Okay,
Yeah, that is actually a very good book, but it's also a documentary through National Geographic. It's called The Journey of Man, Dr. Spencer Wells.
okay. Can you search Ancestry and/or 23andMe for a match on your haplonumber?
Okay, not on Ancestry. 23andMe will give you your haplogroup alphanumeric designation. And that typically you look for your maternal or paternal link on your page on 23andMe, but Ancestry does not do YDNA or mtDNA at all anymore.
Okay, the rest of the comments are thanking you and telling you it's a great program. So,
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you for attending. Thank you, Amy, for putting this together, and your support staff. It was a fantastic opportunity to present, and hopefully a number of people got enough information to make this less scary and more inviting to do DNA testing.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for your attendance, and we'll help you out where we can. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Take care. Thank you.